Hello everyone, welcome to lesson 4 of the Beginner's Game Dev course. In lesson 4 we're going to be going deeper into coding with conditions and variables, and while we're at it we're going to be learning to make some cool effects as well. So I'll show you where we're heading. Yeah, cool. So first thing you might notice is there's a shield around the ship now. I've also got the audio and thruster graphic at the back of the ship tied to the controls. So the thruster sound and the graphic will only show when the ship is actually moving now. I can also now shoot at the ships and they will receive damage. So the enemies are now receiving damage until they explode. You might notice they've got health as a result of that. And the last thing, of course, is this shield. I can bump into the ships while I've got it, but once it's depleted, then the player explodes. So that last bit, the shield, is kind of the challenge of the lesson that you'll have to figure out on your own. So that's a little bit of a sticky one for you. Cool. So before we get into the how-to, I'll give you a bit of concept again. So variables and conditions. Here we go. So I started talking about conditions last time, and I'll give an analogy. So conditions are like branches in a train track, in that they direct the flow of a program. So in this train track photo on the right, you can see that if a train's coming into the screen, at the moment it's only going to be able to turn onto the right track because of the way this fork is configured. If the fork were to swap over to the other side, then the train would be able to go down the left track and only the left track. That's basically what happens when we write conditions, or conditions in code, is we choose which path we want the code to take. The condition itself, what decides which path to take, is based on the truthfulness or falseness of that condition, which will decide whether the action can run. So for example, in the bottom here, we've got this condition on the left that says when a laser collides with the player. So that's our condition. Then and only then can we run the action that will spawn an explosion at the player's position. Okay, so when this condition is true, this action will happen. When this condition doesn't happen, or is not true, or is false, then this condition won't happen. Sorry, then this action won't happen. So that's the gist of conditions. And so I'll talk about variables now. So variables, for those who haven't used them before, are like boxes of information. So variables store information for scripts to access and change. They have a name, so for example health, so this box can be called the health. This variable is the health box. They have a type, like number, boolean, or string. So boolean just means the value can only be true or false, and string means the value can be text or words. In this case on the right, the health is a number because it's got a 3 in it. So variables can only store that type of data. So this health box can only store numbers, so 1, 2, 3, whatever. And lastly, we can change variables in our actions. So if we wanted to change the number 3, for example, we might do something like this. In the bottom again, we have a condition. It says when the laser collides with the player, then we can subtract 1 from health. Okay, so where does health actually live? Well, it turns out that health is a variable which is attached to player, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. So all we're saying is when the laser hits the player, take 1 off the player's health variable. Okay, all right, cool. So let's actually do a bit of coding now. I'll show you how this works. So picking up from where we left off last time, the first thing I'd like to do is to add a bit of control to how this thruster works. So at the moment, when I fly the spaceship, there's a thruster that's always on, but it's not very lively. There's no sound effects, and the thruster doesn't stop when I stop moving the craft. So it'd be cool if we could turn the thruster on and have a sound effect when we're driving the player character, right? All right, so as usual, you'll need to go away and find your own sound effect for a thruster. I've found one on OpenGameArt, I think, but you know the usual places to look. So I'll show you my sound effect, or I'll give you my sound effect to listen to. So where is it? I've got one here called engine thrust. Yeah, so mine's about 4 seconds long, and in the game I want to loop that. Okay, so of course I'll need to add it to the sound object types straight away. So import sounds. I'm going to go and find that sound effect that I previously downloaded. I think, yes, I did actually trim this sound like I've showed you in previous videos. So I cut, I cut that sound down from about 30 seconds to 4. So you might want to do that as well. So that's in the game now. Now, if I want that to be triggered in the game, I need to kind of connect it with the keyboard controls. I'm going to go ahead and delete this disabled code at the top. I don't need that anymore. This is our code from the last lesson. So what I'll start by doing is like kind of show you the how would you say, the hacky or the inefficient way of doing this sound, and then I'm going to show you the way that makes it work really well. So I might think straight away that if I sort of do a keyboard based condition, so keyboard on key pressed, for example, and then say I look at the up arrow because that's how I drive my ship. Then I might just go, okay, well, all I need to do here is like add the audio to play, which sound, the engine thrust. Okay, cool. I'm going to tag this. Probably a good idea from now on to start tagging things you're playing just so that you can turn them off later, basically. So I'm going to say engine, no, I'll just call it thruster actually. So this is my tag. So if I would play that now and press up on the keyboard, okay, so we got the thruster working for one of the arrow keys, but we really need it to play whenever someone presses any of the arrow keys, okay? So what I might do to achieve that is I might think, okay, well, I can just copy this same block and apply it to the other keys. So if I press Control-C to copy and Control-V 3 times, and then I can go through and change these to down, okay? So play the sound on down, play the sound on left, great. And play the sound on right. Okay. Now, here's where it goes a bit funny. If I play this from here, and if you listen carefully, so I'll press right to start, and then I'll press down. It plays, it's actually playing twice. If I press it it's getting louder and louder because if I follow the code through by eye, basically whenever I press one of those keys, all it's going to do is start playing the sound again, and then again and again, and this loop goes round and round, and it tries to play the sound, I guess, as many times as it can. So there's a problem there. It's not quite doing what we want. What we really want is for when the player presses a key, and if the sound is not playing, for the sound to start playing. So in order to achieve that, I'm going to introduce another little bit of context or concept, okay? So the next slide I'm going to show you is just this thing. So variables and conditions. So conditions can check variables for truthfulness and falsefulness too. So for example, in this line here, that when the player's health, so if the player contains a health variable, when the health goes below 0, is less than or equal to 0, then spawn an explosion at the player and then destroy the player. So what it's saying is if the player runs out of health, then destroy the player, okay? But also, conditions can be chained together to check multiple conditions at once. So this is what that looks like here. These two conditions are kind of like chained together. So the first one and then the second one, okay? So this one says if the player's thrust is on, so this player has a variable called thrust on, which is a Boolean, true or false one. So if it's on, but also if the audio tag, so if the audio is already playing something called thruster, or actually if it's not playing something called thruster because of this cross, only then is it going to go and play these actions. So let's just do that one more time. So it's saying if the player's thrust is on and also the thruster audio is not playing, then it's going to play the audio engine thrust, and then set the visibility of this afterburner thing. So those are chained conditions at the start here. Okay, so that's what we really want in our code to make this bit, this sound bit work properly. All right, so we need to introduce a variable then to the player. So we're going to have a variable called thrust on. So if I click on the player and I go to this instance variables section and I click add new instance variable, I call it thrust on, okay? And this is going to be a boolean, so that means this thrust on variable can only be true or false. And initially I want it to be off, so that's correct. If I put it like that, that means it's initially on. So, okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to use that variable and set it to true when the player presses one of those keys now. Okay, so let's go and do that. So I kind of don't need these audio things for now. So what I might do is I'll just I'll actually delete them for now, because that was what was causing our code to play the sound over and over again. So what I really want is on the player's variable, so set a boolean in this case, the thrust on variable, set it to true. Okay, and because I actually want this to happen for all the keys, I'll just copy it into the other input keyboard condition actions, the other keyboard action blocks. Right, so now this is set this variable called thrust on to true. That actually doesn't do anything yet. It's just setting a variable, just changing a variable. What we need to do now is to use that variable to decide whether to play the sound, okay? So now underneath I add a new condition to say player, and I search for variable. I say, is this boolean instant variable set? So check the thrust on variable. So player is thrust on. So if the thrust is on, then we can go and play the engine thrust. Okay, and again I will tag it so I can stop it later if I want to. Right, so this is now heading in the right direction. Okay, the other part that I showed you in the slide was, okay, well, we still kind of have that problem. Even if we played this now, we'd still have the problem where as soon as that sets to true, this part of the code is just going to play that sound over and over again. So I'll demonstrate that actually, just to prove the point. So because this thing is just happening over and over again as soon as any one of these keys effectively sets that thrust on to true. So this is where I need to add the sub condition, or the chain those conditions together, right? So I say add another condition, and to this one I say the audio. I want to check whether the audio is actually playing. So is tag playing? So the tag I'm looking for, of course, is thruster. So if the thruster audio is already playing, sorry, I need to set this to invert. So if this is not playing, then I'll play this sound. Okay, so let's have a look. So that did just play once. I just want to double check that. Yeah, so it's just playing once. It's not getting garbled like it used to. So actually, I kind of unintentionally changed these together in a slightly different way than I meant to. This still works just the same, but what I meant to do was to say add another. No, I wanted to go to this block, say add sub event. Okay, and this will have the same effect, but I just wanted to show you both ways. So if the tag is playing like this, okay, so I can actually delete that one now and put this here. And this just kind of matches the slide I showed you before. So same effect. Let's check. Of course, I needed to invert it to make sure it plays. Okay, let's try this again. So yeah, so it's playing now, which is good. We're heading in the right direction. Yeah, so now we've got the audio playing when the keys are pressed. So that's kind of pretty good so far. What we really want is the audio to stop playing when the keys are not pressed. So to do that, I will now add another event, which is based on the keyboard. So when the keyboard keys are down. So for example, the up key, no, yep, when the up arrow is down, and I'm going to invert it like I have on the other one. So when the up key is not down, then I'm going to say audio stop, and I want to stop that specific sound called thruster. Okay, all right, cool. What I can do is actually copy this thing and then apply it to the other keys like I kind of did before. So I'll change this one to down. I'll change this one to left. Okay, and then lastly to right. Great. Okay, so now when none of those keys are pressed and I press the and my fingers come off the keys, then the sound should stop playing, and it's not. Sorry, we shouldn't be stopping the thruster here. This is not right. So this one should actually be, the action should be to set this player's variable, because we created this Boolean variable. We're going to now set it to false. Okay. All right. So what does that mean? Well, when none of those keys are being pressed, then the thrust on becomes false. So when the loop comes back around to run this sheet in the next loop, it gets to that point, it says, is thrust on? No, it's not. It's now false. So this audio will no longer be played. But actually, I need to add to this. So I needed to add an else. Okay. So else stop the audio. Okay. So this is where we stop the thrust audio. Okay. So that should do what we want. So there we've got the sound control, like it's, you know, it's kind of stop and start. But that's the effect that we want. So the keys are now like controlling whether the sound is playing. Just to recap on this else, what's the else mean? Well, just like on the train tracks, if the thrust is on, then it chooses that action. But if the thrust is not on, the else block runs instead. Okay, so that's what the else does. It's like the other side of the fork in the tracks. Okay, so it just stops the thruster. Let's have a think. So I could either tidy this up a little bit, or I could add in the graphics. Let's add in the graphics first, and then I'll come back and tidy the audio a little bit, just kind of refinement. So at the same time as the engine thruster sound plays, we really want that little afterburner to show and hide as well. So let's go and do that. So okay, let's just think. So when the thrust is on, then we want to show that that afterburner. So let's go to afterburner and type VI for visible. So we'll set that to visible here. Okay, so that's when that is on. I like to put visible things above audio. I don't know why. Okay, but then we also need it to come off. We need the afterburner to switch off when the thruster is stopped. So I'll just control to copy that. But of course I need to change it to invisible. Okay, now there's only one bit that needs to be fixed with this, is the, where is it, the thruster. I need to be able to select that thruster, and I need to set its property to its initially visible property to false, so it doesn't show straight away. So let's test it now. Okay. Yeah. That's what we're doing. All right, so that's pretty good. Cool. We're heading towards a pretty functional game now. So, all right, so I said I'd help refine this a little bit. So at the moment, the starting and stopping of the sound sounds a little bit cheap because it just goes from full engine to no engine completely. And like, we all know that in the real world, things probably start a bit softer and go louder, and maybe go from loud to soft gently. So we can fade in and out to make that sound a bit more realistic. So if we go back to the audio action and also add a fade, all right, so we come to audio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a fade to this thrust on block. So audio, fade. Okay, and which one we want to fade? Thruster. That's the tag for the thrust sound. And I'm going to fade it down to, this one needs to be faded in. This one needs to get louder. Okay, so this one, rather than being negative dB, it needs to go to, let's say, 0. That's the kind of the normal sound level. Okay, yeah, let's try that to start with. And let's do that really quickly. So in like 0.5 of a second. Okay, on the end, just keep playing, all right? So let's try this out. So how does it sound now? That's not right. Oh, okay, yeah, because it's supposed to be, okay, so yeah, so that fade is correct, but the volume of the initial play action is too high. It needs to be started much, much lower. So if we start it at negative 100 decibels, and then that next action would fade it, kind of fade it up to 0, then this should sound more realistic. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, cool, I'm happy with that. Okay, now in the opposite direction, we need it to fade out. We need the sound volume to fade out when the afterburner is stopping. So we'll come to this this else, stop the audio section. So I'll actually just change this one. So this one should be a fade volume, thruster, fade it out to negative 100, and we'll do that over 0.5 seconds, and then stop it at the end of that fade. Yeah, that looks about right. So let's try this. So something's not quite right there. Yeah, I think the fade out is too long actually. So if we change, what if we've set them both to 0.25, what happens? Seems about right. Yeah, so anyway, that's kind of good enough. All right, cool. So I think that kind of runs off the afterburning effect. I'll give a little bit of advice now on how to tidy your code up. So, I mean, in other programming languages, you wouldn't put all of this code in one file, but because we're using the free version of Construct, and yeah, that's mainly the reason we're doing this actually. Because we're using the free version of Construct, we're kind of constrained to the way we organize code a little bit. So I'm going to show you how to group code. And that's kind of a good way to start organizing your code. So let's have a look. I want to move these blocks here down the bottom. Okay, so I held shift to select both of them. These blocks here are all about the keyboard control. Actually, this one is, yeah, this one is the only one out, odd one out, which is like about the enemy. So I'll put the enemy one down there, and everything from here to here is basically about the player's input, the player's control, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click, I'm going to add a group, and I'm going to put all the code in that group. So I'm going to call this player control. Okay, so this is the group, and I'm going to now shift select just those control kind of bits of code, and then I'm going to, yeah, I can squash it, but I'm also going to chuck it right at the top. Okay, so now that code is happily reorganized. You could call that a refactor as well, if you've ever heard that term. Refactoring just means reorganizing your code without changing the functionality of it. So always test after you reorganize your code in case you accidentally didn't just reorganize it. Yeah, it still works, so I'm kind of happy with that. So that's one way to organize your code in Construct, is to group it. Okay, next on the list then. So player health. Well, okay, I'll describe the feature I want. So when the game is normally played, I'd like for the player to just, when it's hit by an enemy, for that to be game over. The player's destroyed, and that's game over. When the player, however, has a shield on and it hits an enemy, what I would like is for the player to kind of bounce off the enemy and maybe lose part of its shield. So that's kind of step 2. But step 1 is just saying, okay, but if the player doesn't have a shield and it hits an enemy, then it explodes. So we can do that, but quite easily first. And again, like what I need to do is add an instance variable to check whether the player has a shield or not. Okay, so I go to player, add new instance variable, and I can create this thing called has shield. Oh, and it's not a number though; it's a boolean. Okay, and the initial value can be false. It doesn't have a shield to start with. All right, cool. So how do I use that then? So, well, I'll need to create another condition. So when the player hits an enemy, so a player collides on collision with another object, and it's going to be the enemy. Okay, so when the player collides with an enemy, and the player doesn't have a shield, so I need to add another one of those sub events here. So I'm going to go right click here and go add a sub event, and I'm going to say does the player have a shield? So I'm going to say var for check the instance variables, and I'm going to say, actually I'm going to use the is boolean comparison. So does it have a shield? So if it has a shield, then no, okay, I want it to be the opposite of that. If it doesn't have a shield, so if the player doesn't have a shield, then I'd like the player to be destroyed. So I can go, spawn some explosions. So I'll do that, spawn, and spawn what? The big explosion. Yep, that's good. And yeah, that looks great. Should we play some audio? We'll play the explosion audio. So we get play. We'll just use the enemy explosion. Looks good. Yep, whatever. And we'll destroy the player. Okay, so player destroy. Great. So does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Let's try this out. So if I hit play, so that kind of went the way I hoped. So if I hit the enemy and don't have a shield, then it should explode and disappear. Okay, great. So that was when the player doesn't have a shield. Now let's think about the other side. So what about the enemies? I'd like the enemies to have health, so that they have to be kind of shot 3 times, for example, before they're destroyed. So they're a bit harder to kill than we are. It sounds a bit unfair, but it makes for a more interesting game, I promise. All right, so we're going to do some enemy health now. I'm just trying to think. Shall I do the code first and then show you the animations? No, we should do the animations first. So, right, so in order to show the enemy taking damage, we're going to need some sprites that show the damage of the ship, right? But if we have a look at our little sprite pack, the sprite pack that I used anyway, so I go to Assets and Sprites, and then I go to, I think it was Redux and Ping. Yeah, so there's the enemy ship I'm using. Is that the one I'm using? No, this one. Right, but I don't have any sprites that contain damage, so I'm going to have to do this myself. So if I open with Gimp, I can kind of create a bit of damage on these sprites myself pretty easily with Gimp. I'm going to show you how. Okay, right, so we're going to zoom in. The gist of what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create 3 kind of copies here in the layers section. I'm going to create 3 layers of this spaceship that have progressive levels of damage, okay? So I can just straight away, I can press Control-C or Edit Copy. I'll go Edit Copy just to show you how. I go Edit, Paste as New Layer, okay? Notice that another one appears here. I'll do it again, Edit, Paste as New Layer. So I've got 3 now. So the first one can be the kind of non-damaged one. So that's fine. I'll leave that one as is. I'm hiding by pressing these eyes, by the way, hiding the layers. So I only want to work on the second one now. I'd like to damage it a little bit. So I can do a couple of things here. I can use the warping tool. So if I right click on warp, make sure it's set to warping. Then I can, if I use it straight away, active layer is not visible. Oh, clicking on the wrong layer. Sorry, make sure you have the layer selected you want to work on. Right, so if I use it straight away on this, I can kind of create some little slices into the ship. So I can create some slices into the ship. I can change the size of this tool here. So if it's really big, then it's going to move the whole thing, right?
So make this much smaller, then I can do something which is kind of maybe a bit cooler. Yeah, so basically, if I move some pixels around, I can make the ship look a little bit damaged. I'll try and make this one really small actually, and kind of make some like little cuts in it, maybe like with that. So boom, boom, yeah, and maybe like a little cut there and a little dent in the. Yeah, that's quite cool. If you pull it from not from the inside, it kind of meshes the colors together a little bit. Yeah, that's cool. What if I did that on the white? Yeah, that's not bad. All right, so that's that's already pretty damaged. All right. Okay, so the other thing I can do is select a paintbrush here, and then I have these different heads for the brush, which will allow me to add some kind of speckle effects. That one looks good. It's too big at the moment, so I'll turn that size down a lot. Maybe not that one actually. That one's let's go with this real speckly one and make it smaller again. But yeah, so yeah, let's just try this out. So yeah, because it's a brush, it kind of adds a bit of, how do you say, it adds a bit of blending when I stroke the brush, which makes it look like a little bit of, debris damage type thing. So yeah, it's pretty rough, but whatever. But let's make it even worse. So what I'll do is I will delete the last layer. So right click on it and delete layer, and I will copy this layer. So duplicate layer. Okay, so I can work on it from where it is. I'll hide the previous layer. So now I'm just working on the last one. So let's mess this up even more. All right. So let's go really crazy move. Let's add some let's add some big movement. Oh, yeah, something like this. Wow, that's a really munted ship. And maybe do a little sharp one as well. So like this is just like all munted. This is like yeah, cool. All right, and I like the cracked windscreen effect I had done on my other one. So I will select a brush. Actually, I'll select a pencil for the cracked windscreen, and just the little pointed one. That's too big. I'll turn the size right down and create a crack effect. So let's just say it's cracked across here like this. It's not into the paint though. Like that. And let's just finish that off. Yeah, cool. So that's a cracked windscreen. So wow, that's a really munted ship. Okay, so right, let's go through these then just to check them. So let's check the first one. Looks good. The second one looks slightly broken. And the third one looks quite damaged. I might just add a little bit more to that so that it doesn't look like it's just deformed. So let's add some more speckling to this one. Turn this down like that. And add, why is that not working? Because I chose white. So I'll undo that. Switch these colors and then, yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. That's the last frame. So, right, them all in place. All right, so I want to now put these into my game. So what I'll do is I'll just export them one at a time. So if I select the first layer, I can go File, Export as, and where am I going to put it? In my sprites folder. I'll put it in this enemy damage folder that I already created, and I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it enemy health, and this one is going to be so it's going to have the most health, so it's enemy health 3. Okay. And what's it going to ask me? Oh, and then I'm going to, of course, make it a ping. So export. Okay, and yeah, and let's just go check on that one before we move to the other ones. So sprites, enemy damaged, and where are we? Enemy health 3. Let's open it. Does it still look okay? Yeah, great. All right, so we'll do that for the other ones. Yeah, I'll need to turn the other ones off. So I go file, export as, and I'll just change this one to the 2 because that's got 2 bits of health left. And then export. Yep. Okay. And the last one, just show this one. So file, export as the really munted ship. And again, this one is now health 1, which means it's got like only a tiny bit of health left. And then export. Okay, so I could save that project as well if you want, but I'm just going to leave that for now. All right, so let's check that out. So what I can do now is I can use those sprites in my existing enemy to add those different states of health, right? So if I go, what's the fastest way? So I can go I can go load animations, and then I can go find this those 3 ones I just added, 1, 2, and 3, 3, 2, 1, great. And let's just add those, and they should. So what I'll do is I'll copy it. So I'll go duplicate and duplicate, okay? I'll leave the original for now, okay? But the first one, I want to rename this, and this is going to be health 3, right? So it's the max health. Which ship is that? It's not that one. It's not that one. It's definitely that one. And of course, I need to rotate it to the right, okay? So that's number 3. And the next one I'm going to call health 2. That's kind of medium health. So it's not that one. It's not that one, but it is that one. And I'll need to rotate it. Okay. And the last one, health. This is health 1. All right. So this one is that one. So I'm going to delete that and rotate. Cool, cool. So let's just, I'll zoom out a bit actually. Right, so let's just check these. So the default I don't need anymore. I'll delete that. Health 3 looks good. 2 and 1. It looks like it went through a compactor or something. Eh? Okay, so those are the health states of my ship, of my enemy ship. All right, now the question is, how do I use those? And of course I'm going to have to write a little bit of code. So this time, this is about this section here that we already added. So when the enemy is struck by a laser, at the moment there's an explosion spawned, the enemy is destroyed, and the laser is destroyed, blah, 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 blah. What we kind of want to do actually is, depending on how much health the ship has, to show a different animation of the ship, right? So we need to do that thing we did for the player where we introduce an instance variable on the enemy. So click on the object prototype to add the instance variable to all of them, and I'm going to call this health, okay? And that's a number, and the initial value should be set to 3 because it has a max health of 3 to start with. All right, cool. So what should happen then? So rather than the enemy being destroyed, we can take that out, let's take it out, and let's take out the explosion as well. It doesn't need to be destroyed, but it does need to lose some health. So if I go to enemy, for variable, and go to subtract from for the instance variable, so subtract 1 from the health. Okay, so that's not going to do much on screen, but it's going to take 1 off the health. Then you might be imagining already, okay, well I need to add another event, another condition that's going to check what that health is, and then decide whether to, whether to destroy the thing or not. So all right, so I can I can do an enemy condition this time. Again, checking a variable, compare an instance variable. Yeah, compare the health, and if it's less than or equal to 0, okay, then what? Then I should do those things, make explosions and destroy it. So let's do the explosion first. Whoops. Let's do the enemy explosion first. So go spawn another object. What? Spawn an explosion. And yep, good. Why don't we destroy it while we're here? Cool. We need to, so this one, this enemy explosion noise should actually come down here. Yeah, I might hold control actually and copy it. This one, probably we could use another sound there for when a laser hits an enemy but the enemy is not being destroyed. Okay, so we'll come back to that. But for now, yeah, let's play and see what happens. Lasers. Okay, so it took 3 hits to destroy, but it hasn't yet shown this change of state. So we need to also do that. And the thing we need to do, so this will be up here when the laser does hit an enemy, then we want to change the state of the enemy's animation as well. So that's kind of a little bit complex, but I'll show you what we do. So we go to enemy, we go to the anim section, and we're going to set the animation to, yeah, I'll show you first actually. So I'll just say done to that for now. So I set it to what? It's not, we haven't done it yet. But what we need to do is to set the animation to one of these 3 names, health, 3, 2, or 1, okay? Okay, so now to do that, what we can do is we can do some clever programming. So health dash, all right, so we could hard code 3, but then it would always be 3. So what we actually want is to get the health. We want to get the health of the enemy ship from itself. So we can say combine that string health with, and the enemy ship is called enemy red dot, what is it, health? That's the name of the variable. So what they're saying is put together these 2 things, this string health dash, and then add on the end of it enemy red dot health, which will be a number from 3 to 0 or lower. Okay, so it's saying like, so if the health at the moment is 2, then it says like health dash, put on the end of it 2. So it'll be health 2. Okay, why is that happening? Because again, I want it to play this animation, which really means just show that single sprite. Okay, cool. So let's try that out. Let's see what happens. So, okay. Do it again. Whoa. Okay, so there's the enemy damage in action. One thing that might make that a little bit cooler is, like I said, if we have maybe a smaller explosion that happens when the lasers hit it. Yeah, so all right, that's a challenge for you actually. So here's your challenge. So make some small explosions on the enemy. So when the enemy is hit with a laser but not destroyed, make a smaller explosion and sound to happen. So to do that, you can find smaller explosion effects and sounds online and then add them to the game. And then make them happen whenever a laser hits the enemy, okay? And that should not change the final bit where the enemy is destroyed by when it runs out of health, okay? Yeah, all right, so I hope you had some fun with that challenge. Before we move on to the last challenge, I'm going to add one little modification. So throughout this game development, we still don't have the enemies moving. So I'll kind of give you a hint about how we're going to do that soon. So if we select the enemies and add a behavior, we're going to elaborate on this next time. But if we add the bullet behavior, like we have on the lasers, and then just set the speed to what, like 20 or something. So they're moving pretty slowly now, but we'll add to this next week so that they can maybe chase us around the screen a little bit. There we go. Cool. That's all the coding I'm going to do for you today. I'm going to leave you with one more complex challenge. Here it is. So create a shield. Add a shield to the player so that it can bump into enemies with a shield and then explode when the shield is depleted. Okay, so you've got some of the functionality in with your player has shield boolean variable. So these are the other bits you might want to consider. So first, finding a shield sprite online and add it to your game. And then give the shield health so that it depletes when it hits an enemy. So you might want to look at the code that we've already written for the enemy on collision with laser
and the enemy health less than 0 blocks. They are similar to the code you might write for the shield, okay? All right, so yeah, enjoy that, and I will see you at the next lesson.